Perhaps the most famous of all of Leonardo da Vinci's paintings is his 15th century depiction of the Last Supper. Leonardo was hardly the first to artistically depict this sacred scene from the life of Christ, but he certainly was unique in his approach. Secrets revealed. The mysterious messages hidden in Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. During the Italian Renaissance, art was typically used as a teaching device, calculated in its composition and intentional in the messages. It was designed to share and reveal. Leonardo was no exception to this approach, famous for his use of subtle symbolism in his various paintings. For example, like the 20th century director Alfred Hitchcock, who famously did a cameo in 40 of his 54 movies, Leonardo is believed to have regularly placed a portrait of himself in many of his pieces. Indeed, some believe that the Mona Lisa is actually a picture of Leonardo imagining himself as a woman. Even the controversial Shroud of Turin is believed by some to be a Leonardo hoax, displaying his image rather than the image of Christ. In his painting of The Last Supper, most art historians believe that the figure of Thaddeus, also known as Jude, second from the right in the painting, is Leonardo, standing in for the ancient apostle. Leonardo's well-recognized painting of The Last Supper has been the subject of numerous conspiracy theories, speculating about its various symbols and their meanings. Some of what he included in the masterpiece has obvious meaning. Other symbols depicted are clearly deliberate, but as to Leonardo's intent, one can only conjecture. Let's look at some of what this powerful piece conveys. It seems significant that, quote, the picture occupies an end wall in the dining hall at the convent of Santa Maria della Grazia in Milan, end quote. How apropos that a mural about the Last Supper should be displayed in the dining hall or eating area of a religious order. The scene the painting depicts is the moment immediately after Christ shocked his apostles with the surprise announcement that one of them would betray him. As would be expected, Jesus is at the center of the scene, his body forming a triangle, symbolic of the Holy Trinity. Indeed, the apostles are divided into 4 groups of 3, creating a symmetry that also repetitively highlights the 3 persons of the Trinity. Even the fact that there are 3 windows behind Jesus has been seen by some as a symbol of the Trinity. Perhaps the second most symbolic figure in the painting is Judas Iscariot. Note how his head is lower than everyone else in the scene, suggesting his descent into darkness. Related to that is the fact that Judas' countenance or complexion is the only one that is dark or shadowed in the painting. He is holding a bag of money, presumably the 30 pieces of silver he has been paid to betray Jesus. The apostate apostle is depicted as left-handed. Anciently, the left hand symbolized that which was sinister and was often associated with those who were insane or had rejected God. Left-handedness was seen as a curse and a sign of, quote, bad luck, an indication of evil things to come, end quote. Thus, one source noted that, quote, Judas uses his left hand rather than the right to foretell Christ's fate, end quote, hinting that Judas would betray him. Subtly placed is a salt container, which Judas has knocked over, spilling its contents onto the table. In the book of Leviticus, salt was a symbol of the covenant, and thus Judas spilling the salt symbolizes the notion that his covenant relationship with Christ had been severed or ruptured through his evil act. He was symbolically stepping away from Christ and his apostleship. Salt was also an ancient Christian symbol for purity, incorruptibility, fidelity, and friendship, all of which Judas ultimately rejected, hence the spilled salt. Because salt was also sometimes seen as a symbol for protection against evil, the spilling of the salt suggests that evil was about to descend. We see that Judas is reaching for the sop, which Jesus said was the sign of his betrayer. Finally, it is no coincidence that Leonardo includes exactly 13 people at this dinner, highlighting not simply bad luck, as the number represents today, but faithlessness and betrayal, as it symbolized anciently. St. Peter is also an important figure in Leonardo's hidden symbolism. The chief apostle holds a knife near Judas's back, perhaps suggesting Iscariot's pending demise. More commonly, interpreters of the scene see Peter's knife as foreshadowing the fact that later that night he would cut off the ear of Malchus, the servant of the high priest, who came to arrest Jesus, a potential symbol of divine justice. Peter's left hand is at the throat of the person next to him, traditionally interpreted as John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. Many interpreters of the painting claim that this is the equivalent of a Masonic penal sign placed at the throat of John, symbolic of the tension between Peter and John, so aptly depicted in the Gospel of St. John. A more controversial aspect of this famed painting is the fact that Leonardo depicted Jesus without a halo, when every version of the Last Supper prior to this painting depicted Jesus with a nimbus or halo, and his disciples are also traditionally portrayed with halos. Why would he leave this symbol out of the painting? Many believe that this is Leonardo's attempt to say that he is a skeptic and a naturalist, that he has doubts about the divinity of Jesus and the inspired nature of his apostles. Thus, the lack of halos has been seen as a sign that the disciples were common people rather than saints, and Jesus himself was actually mortal rather than divine. For some, that explains why Thaddeus, represented by Leonardo's own image, is turned away from Christ, implying Leonardo's own rejection of Jesus' divinity. Some believe that doubting Thomas, the figure immediately to Jesus' left and to the right of him as we view the painting, is actually the self-portrait of Leonardo rather than Thaddeus. If that is the case, the doubting part might make sense, as most think Leonardo had his doubts. Other curious features of the painting include things like Jesus appearing to present the bread of the Lord's Supper to the viewer of the painting, specifically the nuns of the Santa Maria della Grazia convent, rather than to the 12 who are attending the actual dinner. In the original painting, Jesus' feet were in cruciform style. Unfortunately, in 1652, a doorway was cut through the bottom of the depiction, eliminating this symbol of Christ's pending death. One of the most controversial aspects of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper is the figure on Jesus' right, to the left of him as we view the painting. While most assume this is John the Beloved, many have speculated that the figure is actually a female, perhaps none other than Mary Magdalene, a theory made popular by the 2003 book, The Da Vinci Code. The reason for assuming this might be Mary is multifaceted. The individual is effeminate with longer hair and a pale complexion when compared to the others in the scene. It has been argued that if this is John, why is he not leaning on the breast of Jesus, as John 13:23 says he was during the Last Supper? It has also been suggested that an M shape for Mary Magdalene, or matrimonio, is subtly present in the painting, implying not only that this is Mary, but also that Mary was Jesus' wife. Others claim that there is a V, representing the Holy Grail, or a female womb. Related to this last claim, some have pointed out that the wine of the sacrament, the chalice used for the Lord's Supper, is missing in the scene. Thus, they reason, if Mary Magdalene is the Holy Grail and the wife of Jesus, then the cup is intentionally missing because she is the cup. And if the effeminate figure is Mary Magdalene, Peter's threatening gesture at her throat might suggest that he felt that this female disciple was somehow forcing her way into a place that Peter felt only men should be, in a sense, taking Christ from the apostles, as suggested in the Gnostic Gospel of Philip. One source notes, quote, "In the painting, Peter was leaning menacingly toward Mary Magdalene and slicing his blade-like hand across her neck." With all of that evidence for Mary as the 12th disciple in the scene, it is worth noting that Leonardo basically copied the hundreds of other Last Supper paintings done before his 15th century depiction, and St. John was almost always portrayed as young and effeminate in those. Additionally, the identity of each of the apostles in the Last Supper were given by Leonardo in his notebooks, and he labeled the effeminate figure as John the Beloved, rather than as Mary Magdalene. If John was the disciple whom Jesus loved, can we really believe that he would be the one apostle omitted from the scene? Wouldn't Judas be the first to go? Of course, there are other supposed symbols buried in the painting. It is regularly pointed out that, quote, scholars have identified a 40-second musical composition within the painting, end quote, using the pieces of bread and the apostles' hands as the notes. Also, the grouping of the disciples in threes, with Jesus in the center, reveals a numeric pattern of 33133 in the painting. It has been speculated that this pattern is a reference to Lamentations chapter 3, verses 31 through 33, which reads, quote, "For no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Though he brings grief, he will show compassion. So great is his unfailing love. For he does not willingly bring affliction or grief to anyone." End quote. As Leonardo was a skeptic and a bit of a humanist, it is speculated that he is hinting at the idea that though his critics thought he would end up in hell, Leonardo believed that if Jesus was indeed divine, then, according to the Bible, he is also merciful and would not cast Leonardo off forever. Did Leonardo da Vinci intend us to take from this most famous of his works the ideas just highlighted? There seems to be little question that he is intentionally using symbols as a means of conveying something to his viewers. However, as with anything as subjective as art, interpreting a painting is always guesswork. In the end, only the artist truly knows what he intended to say, and the variety of theories about this particular piece only goes to prove how much guessing interpreters are doing when trying to understand the secret symbols embedded in this holy scene.